All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe. It really helps us out. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. The link is in the comments below. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Patrick says, name two animals, and his client says lion and tiger. This is the answer that the client has been giving the last 2 weeks. What could Patrick do to encourage more responses? The question is looking at Patrick and what intervention he can possibly use. Now, what is Patrick trying to accomplish? What is Patrick's goal? Patrick wants to encourage more responses. Right now, we know when Patrick says name two animals, the client says lion and tiger, and this is what the client has been saying for the last 2 weeks. And this sometimes happens with clients, especially if we're using a lot of discrete trial teaching, where their responses can become very repetitive and very rote. And so we want to expand those responses. Now, what can Patrick do to encourage more responses given the information? A, change the SD to name two animals that are not lion and tiger. Sure. One way of changing up a response is changing the SD because the SD is going to evoke the response. And so if Patrick wants different animals, he can simply change the SD to specify more animals that don't include lion and tiger. What about B? Reinforce the client only if they name an animal other than lion or tiger. Sure. If the client wants to continue earning reinforcement, they will now need to say an animal that is not a lion and tiger. So A is perfectly acceptable. B is acceptable. What about C? Use response cost if the client names lion or tiger. Now, what is wrong with C? Well, think about what a response cost is. A response cost is a punishment procedure. And if we're going to use a punishment procedure, we're going to reduce a behavior. If Patrick wants to increase and encourage more responses, he's going to need something more reinforcing, or he's going to need to change the antecedent. A response cost is going to decrease lion and tiger, but it does not mean it's going to increase other behaviors. So if Patrick wants to encourage more responses, it's going to be both A and B. He can change the SD or instruction to name two animals that are not lion and tiger, or he can reinforce the client only if they name an animal other than lion or tiger. Last 4 weeks, you've meal prepped every Sunday. You've made the same meal for each day of those 4 weeks. This Sunday, you can't bring yourself to make those same meals again. What is a likely behavior analytic explanation? So you always want to explain things in behavior analytic terms. What does that mean? Well, it means we want to, especially on the exam, try to use behavior analytic terminology, and then we want to be objective. We want to be behavioral, right? So we want to explain things like we would in practice. What are we trying to explain here? Well, we know you've meal prepped every day, or the last 4 weeks, you've been meal prepping on Sunday, and you've made the same meal each day of those 4 weeks. As a result, this Sunday, you can't make those meals again. Now, put yourself in the shoes of this question. If you ate the same meals 4 weeks straight, what would eventually happen, do you think? You would eventually become tired of those meals. Now, if we want to be behavior analytic, what's a better way to describe that? Because we could say, well, I became tired of it, but that's not very behavior analytic. What's more behavior analytic than saying we were tired of the meals? A, you are experiencing deprivation. Well, deprivation has to do with motivating operations, and deprivation says we're not getting enough of something. We want more of something. That isn't the case here. We've gotten too much of it. We don't want any more. What's happened is B, we are experiencing satiation. And when you're satiated, you've gotten too much of something. You don't want any more of something. And so if you've eaten these meals every day for 4 weeks and you no longer want them, you are most likely satiated. Now, C, you are tired of that same food. It's originally how we described it, but C is not behavior analytic like B. B is using behavior analytic terminology, being objective and being specific. Tired of that same food, that's much more subjective, right? So B is a better answer. And then D, you no longer like that food. Well, there's no indication of you not liking the food ever again, or D is not very behavior analytic. So D is just not a very good answer. The best answer The most behavior analytic explanation is B. You are experiencing satiation. The Los Angeles Lakers lost again to the Denver Nuggets. This marks the 12th time in 13 games that Los Angeles has lost to Denver, including the playoffs. How are we tracking Laker losses? So we have a measurement question. And what are we measuring? In measurement questions always ask, what am I measuring? We are tracking or measuring Laker losses. How are we doing that? Well, we know they lost again to the Nuggets, which is the 12th time in 13 games. So there's a couple different ways you could look at this, right? You could look at it almost as a percentage of occurrence question if we had a percentage, because out of the 13 games, 12 times were losses. Or we could simply look at it as a count, because we're counting how many losses the Lakers have. So, how are we tracking losses specifically? A, rate. Rate does include frequency, but rate also includes a time component. And we're not looking at any sort of rate, right? It's not games per whatever. It's just 12 times in 13 games. We don't have a rate calculated here. What we do have is a frequency. 12 is our frequency. How are we tracking losses? We're counting them. We counted 12 losses. We used frequency. Very straightforward. Into response time. We're not counting time in between losses or in between responses. And then duration. We're not tracking how long each game took or how long each loss took. We're simply just counting up the number of losses the Lakers have. And we counted 12. We used frequency. Jason is putting toy cars away with his mom. Jason picks up a car and throws it across the room. Jason's mom immediately sends Jason to timeout for 3 minutes, and Jason starts crying. What can we know for sure about timeout relative to the car being thrown? Now, be careful here, right? What do we know about consequences? We know consequences change behavior. In order to specify what type of consequence we've used, we need to know how the future behavior actually changed. Can we know for sure how this behavior changed? Well, what do we know about the timeout relative to the car being thrown? We know Jason's putting cars away. We know Jason picked up the car and threw it. And so, as a consequence, Jason's mom sent Jason to timeout. So, that timeout was the consequence for throwing the car. And then Jason's crying because of timeout. What do we know about timeout? Do we know how it affected picking up the car and throwing it across the room? We don't. We don't know what future behavior looks like. So all we know for sure is that timeout was a consequence. We don't know if it was B, punishment, because we don't know if throwing across the room decreased. So we can't say it was punishment. We don't know if it was negative reinforcement, because we don't know if throwing across the room increased. So we can't say it was reinforcement. And it wasn't an antecedent because the timeout relative to the car being thrown was the consequence. The consequence for throwing across the room was timeout. So the only thing we know for sure about the timeout relative to the car being thrown was that it was a consequence. Think about this question if you don't understand. We only can be specific about the consequence if we know how it changes future behavior. We didn't know how it changed future behavior here. All we know is that it was a consequence. So that's all we know for sure. We have a consequence. When selecting the type of token that will be used in a token economy, what is the most important aspect to make sure the token is effective? So we have a token economy question, and in a token economy, we have tokens, which are used to exchange for backup reinforcement. And how do those tokens gain reinforcing properties? Well, they're paired with those backup reinforcements. The question wants to know, how do we make that token effective? What's the most important aspect? Because tokens come in all shapes, sizes, colors. Now, when you're selecting that token, what do you want to make sure of? What's the most important thing you can do to ensure that token is effective? A, the token needs to have a picture of something the client likes. So it doesn't really matter, right? You can use blank cards. You can use green cards. You can use anything really as tokens, right? As long as they're manageable and you can exchange them. The picture is not the most important aspect. B, the token should resemble real money in some form. If you're working with a client who's super young, they might not even know what money is. So money means nothing to them. So B is not the most important aspect. C, the token should be paired with a reinforcing item. Yes, if you want that token to be effective, it's got to be paired with a reinforcing item. The only way that token is going to become reinforcing itself and have properties that are going to make the client want to work for the token. And then D, the token should only be usable for a single behavior. One of the good things about a token and a token economy is that they're generalized, right? We can use tokens in a variety of situations. It's not good if the token is only effective for a single behavior. You want the token to be effective for a variety of behaviors in a variety of situations. So when you're selecting the type of token to be used in a token economy, the most important aspect is that the token is paired with a reinforcing item. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already. Click the button below. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. The link is in the comments below. When you pass, let us know. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.